Welcome to American Dream. I'm Tina Richards, your host tonight. On January 8, 2002, President Bush, alongside many Democrats and Republicans, signed into law No Child Left Behind. This was to change out our education from the 1965 was the last update of our system to standardized based testing and to hopefully make accountable and to have certain goals so that our children would be able to, when they left school, would have basic skills and would be able to compete in the 21st century. And now that it is up for, after 5 years, it's up for renegotiation to see if they want to put it back in for another 5 years, if they want to change it. Congress is back and forth right now debating how to go forward. Is this the right way or is it not the right way? Has it achieved what they wanted to achieve or not? Tonight we have with us to discuss these issues and more, Paula Millar. She is a 20-year educator in the Rochester School District. And we also have Fred Millar, who is an educational sociologist and a parent activist who is studied the No Child Left Behind. And welcome to the show.
Thanks very much.
And first thing I've got to do is if you could please explain what is an educational sociologist. I had not heard about that until I started researching about the No Child Left Behind.
Well, the sociology of education basically just involves studying all the different ways that education can be effective. How is education organized? What are the aims? What are the goals? And what are the mechanisms to achieve it? A lot of us who studied educational sociology in the 1960s were very interested in sort of the class and race biases that we saw in the education system. And in fact, the education system was analyzed as a way of maintaining those biases. That was during a time
in our country where we still were fighting for to get rid of segregation out of the schools in the South, and actually, I guess, throughout America. That was that part of what you studied also?
That was part of it, and of course, there's now a resegregation going on in American schools, which is quite disturbing. But it was also a class bias kind of situation. I mean, many of us were highly aware about the inequalities in the U.S. system, not only in terms of the inherited wealth that people had, but also the way the school system functioned to maintain those inequalities over time, and how the school system actually quite cleverly changed itself to help maintain those inequalities over time. So part of my study was a historical study about, in a particular era, how did the school systems adjust to demands that were put on them for more equality, and in effect work out a whole system of more inequality, but in a very hidden and quite sophisticated way. I mean, I can get into that. The mechanism that I studied was the community college system that was brought in around in the 1950s and 1960s. But this is not unique. I mean, American education has evolved in different ways in different times to meet the challenges of demands from ordinary people that they get more out of education, and that it not be something that an education system that mainly perpetuates inequality, so that those who have get and those who don't have are kept in their place. And many of us have been in school systems, of course, where we experienced that there was quite a lot of inequality, even though much of it, as students, we probably didn't see it. It was kind of hidden, but when we look back, we see that it was. So it's a fascinating subject. So as an educational sociologist, in those days, the deal was that people thought social scientists, if they studied these what looked like intractable problems like urban education, that they could make a serious difference and help to solve the problems of urban America.
Which you actually taught in inner city school up in Rochester.
I began my career teaching third grade in rural Pennsylvania, and then went on to teach in high school in Rochester, New York, which per capita has the highest murder rate in New York State. Is the distinction between haves and have-nots in the county is quite remarkable.
Haves and have-nots is another way of saying possibly class distinction.
Yes, class distinction. Primarily the students served by the district I taught in were African American or Puerto Rican, with an influx of third world country immigrants, people from Africa, people from some of the South American countries. Definitely a disadvantage as far as schooling, but also in other aspects of their lives, where kids come into school with a small vocabulary, with very little background knowledge, or their knowledge is not what is going to be tested of them, whether it be, that they're coming from another culture, they're coming from somewhere else, but kids who started school with a couple of strikes against them to begin with, as it is to fit into the box that is the American educational system.
Yeah, the No Child Left Behind has some conceptions throughout America, and people who have had their kids in the school system have some formed opinions, some have not. What I'd like to do is, earlier today I went out into the street and I just asked people walking on the street what did they thought about the No Child Left Behind, and if they had any opinions at all. And what I'd like to do is, if we could go ahead and play the tape that shows what the person on the street, what their typical response and their conceptions or perceptions of the No Child Left Behind.
I think it's good in theory, but in practice I think there have been a lot of problems with it in terms of some of the priorities have gotten shifted in ways that they shouldn't have gotten shifted.
What type of problems specifically?
I think there's way too much focus on testing now in schools, and the teachers have to spend too much time just teaching to the tests as opposed to really working with kids to fulfill their potential. That's the main problem, in my opinion. But I think in theory, it's great to have a focus on improving education. It should probably just be done a little bit differently.
In general, it's nice as far as being able to have some kind of evaluation, so long as it's not just kind of, again, going back to teaching to the tests. I hope that they also come up with enough funding in order to be able to manage it so that the states have a nice balance in the funds as well, or they are able to be supplemented since they're being held accountable to achieving those standards. It's a tough call, in terms of being able to make it all work.
I think that we shouldn't have any children left behind, but the thing is that those regulated tests and all that stuff, sometimes children don't do well on that. So, to make everybody come up to that standard, I guess you have to have some line where there's a standard, but I think it's still the individual, and they should teach and not leave any child left behind, but maybe they should pay the teachers more so they would have better teachers, so then they wouldn't have to have these tests.
I think we got a reaction from Polly as far as we should pay the teachers more, and but overall I kept hearing the response was that we're teaching to the test, that No Child Left Behind may have a lot of good things in it, but it's not taking into account the individual. Mm-hmm. Fred, would you like to go ahead and address some of that?
Well, it seems to me that the law has a title, No Child Left Behind, because there was a massive perception in the country that there was a very big problem about some children not being adequately served in the school system. And I think the one thing that as an educational sociologist I can say is that it's really a pity that in America we had to have a federal law to force American schools and school systems, which are supposed to be serving a democratic society, we had to force them to give information about the students they were not serving.